So what we ended up doing with the help of the working group and a lot of the research that many of the folks around that table had done over the years, and through a scan of that research, along with research on adult learning and adult development, because one of the things I wanted to learn more about, in fact, it was a question that Secretary Duncan had asked me years back. He said, how do we incentivize parents to be more engaged in their kids' education? What are some of the things that we have to do? So I actually went to the adult learning literature about what motivates people to act. So I looked at Yuri Brofenbrenner and I looked at Daniel Pink and lots of people who have written about why do we do what we do? What are the incentives? And what I found was that it's not extrinsic, it's intrinsic. And so I started to look at, well, what are those different intrinsic motivators? And guess what? It's trust, respect. We respond to people who we know and who we feel we can trust. We respond when we get a chance to practice to learn something. We're not good at just reading things and then going off and be able to do them. So I started to look at all that literature, and then I also looked at the leadership literature. And from all of that, and from the advice of my colleagues, I put together the dual capacity framework for family school partnerships. And it basically describes it. First of all, it's not a roadmap, and I emphasize that because sometimes when I do my work in the field, whether I go to different countries, they say, just give us the list of things to do. So we'll do this, check, we're done. That's not how it works, because your context in Australia is different than our context here in the United States. Each city is different. So to take something and try to apply it lockstep from one place to another, we knew was not smart. So what we did was the framework provides what we think are the basic important components of any initiative. So those non-negotiable pieces that will make it work. So I often use the metaphor of a bicycle, right? So you have a bike. The bike has some basic components that all bikes have. 2 wheels, brakes, a frame, a seat, handlebar, pedals, right? Every bike has that. But if you're on a mountain bike, that bike looks very different in terms of how wide the tires are, how sturdy the frame is, than a racing bike, which you can lift with your finger, right? So this is what we mean. We provided the basic components of good practice in that framework. And then it's up to the folks who are implementing to add on the different design pieces that are going to make it more aligned with your context. So the first thing the framework does is identifies the problem. And the problem statement basically says that why we haven't had effective partnerships is because the stakeholders, no one's trained them. And what's different about this framework is that it identifies that we need to build the capacity of families and staff. Because a lot of times when I go to work in districts, they say, what can we do to fix our families? How can we train our families so they do what we would like them to do to support learning? Well, guess what? The professional staff also need to be trained. So you can't do one without the other, because if you do, as my colleague Michelle Brooks says, you end up with a system of disequilibrium. You end up with parents who are all charged up and ready to go, and still school staff that are still saying, no, we want you on the outside, and then you end up with tension. So you have to train both at the same time. So that's the problem statement. We then identify the components of good practice. And they're common sense, but they're taken from the literature, that these initiatives involve interaction, where people are doing things and learning and had a chance to practice the skills and do role plays. We don't just learn from somebody handing us a piece of paper and say, go do this at home. It doesn't work. That they are collaborative, that people get a chance to work together across roles, so teachers and parents and principals working together on problems. They are relational, very much relational, building up that trust. So we identify the different components of good practice. We also identify the different components of how to make sure that the initiative is sustained. So it talks about providing the resources, making sure that family engagement is integrated in everything. So how the people in the curriculum and instruction department, the people in the information technology department, they're all working together on family engagement. So you see it in all the different facets of the school district, not just in the family engagement department, right? So it has to be integrated throughout everything. And then the district has to look at this as part of systemic change. If it just looks at it as, oh, this is a nice thing to do, you know, we're going to be nice to our parents, and don't see it as a strategy for whole school improvement, then you're going to have a problem. So the leadership is really key. So the framework identifies all of that. It also looks at what are our goals, and this actually gets into the evaluation piece. And then the final part of the framework just says, this is what you should see. Now you're going to see staff that are able to better engage with families. They can acknowledge families' funds of knowledge. They're good at the cultural consciousness piece and being aware of the diversity. On the family side, they're able to participate authentically and robustly in a number of different roles, whether it be monitors, supporters, encouragers, advocates. They're going to be more able to interact. So right now,